Attorney David Weinstein from the Hinshaw law firm joins me now. David, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
These are pretty serious charges. Michael Avenatti is looking at, what, 300 years in prison? Talk to me about these accusations.
Well, that's the maximum penalty if they convict him on all accounts. These are far more serious than the charges he was looking at out of New York. And what's even more serious here is a violation of trust of his clients that he undertook, if the allegations are true. He had several individuals who were seeking to and did receive large settlements in the millions of dollars. They received literally nothing. He allegedly pocketed that cash, used it to pay off his own firm's legal bills, pay off investments he had, and in one instance make payments for a private jet he was using. So what's troubling to me here is not only the allegations, but the fact that he's violating the trust of his clients.
If and when this goes to trial, could the prosecutors try to show possibly some sort of pattern of behavior?
The pattern in New York is completely different. The things he's accused of doing in New York, that was a shakedown of Nike and trying to get them to use him and his legal services and to make payments to cover up what he believed was their misconduct. This is entirely separate, and apart from that, two separate trials. They can't even mix the two in front of the jury.
All right, let's talk about Julian Assange. After nearly 7 years, the Department of Justice may finally get him within his grasp. That jumps out at you from, what jumps out at you from this indictment?
So what jumps out for me from this indictment is the activity that they've indicted him for. Everybody seemed to be focusing on his involvement with the release of the information from Manning to WikiLeaks and what a good thing he was doing and freedom of the press. That's not what's at issue here. What's at issue here is his activity during a week in March of 2010 to help Manning uncover additional information that Manning didn't have already in his fingers. Manning and Assange were working together to try to crack a code to get access to more documents. That's what the criminal conduct is. It's the computer hacking, not the dissemination of the information. So what jumps out to me is that that's conduct that's not protected by anybody's First Amendment right. That's conduct that should be protected against. We don't want anyone hacking into our government's computer systems. So for him to argue his freedom of speech is being infringed, that's not going to be a winning argument here. He is, at this point, part of a conspiracy to hack into a government computer. That's the sole criminal activity that they're looking for.
If prosecutors finally get him to the United States, could they compel him to testify and shed some light, if he has any information, on the possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, which the special counsel was investigating, but we still have not seen that report, although we may see it very soon? They
could very well serve him with a subpoena. The statute of limitations for involvement in those activities, which would have occurred more than 5 years ago, he'd have no Fifth Amendment right to say, I'm not going to testify because I'm going to incriminate myself. That conspiracy didn't continue on perhaps as long to extend the statute of limitations. So as long as he doesn't have a Fifth Amendment right, and they're extraditing him here solely on these computer hacking charges. There's something called the rule of specialty. So once he's here, you can't charge him with anything else. So again, he'd lose his Fifth Amendment protection there, and if he's subpoenaed, he'd have to testify.
And I would think that relations between the United States and Britain are strong enough that we expect that they will extradite him, right?
It's up to the British court to put it through the process and for him to make arguments as to why he shouldn't be brought here. Having not seen the extradition affidavit itself, it seems to me he'll in all likelihood be brought here to face these charges.
All right, David Weinstein, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.